This song is by Barbara Taft. Once there was a time, there were some women who worked hard for peace in every way. They stood on corners such long hours, shouting out that peace should come one day. Those were some dames, my friend, we thought that war should end. We'd sing and dance, and some would even pray. And some would even pray. We'd stand for peace with words, we'd make our voices heard. We were not young, but peace can win the day. Just last week we stood upon a corner, giving flyers out to show the way. Here's another woman, let us warn her. She shouldn't heed what warriors have to say. Those were some dames, my friend, we thought that war should end. We'd sing and dance, and some would even pray. We'd stand for peace with words, we'd make our voices heard. We were not young, but peace can win the day. In the glass we saw our own reflections. Our faces show the price we've had to pay. To reach peace would truly be perfection. We'll stay here till wars have gone away. Those were some dames, my friend, we knew that war should end. We'd sing and dance, and some would even pray. We'd fight for peace with words, we'd make our voices heard. We were not young, but peace can win the day. Thank you, and now we'll start our next program, which is Move the Money from War to Peace, Global to Local. And please go right ahead, Cheryl.
Good afternoon and good late evening to our European attendees. I'm Cheryl Spencer. I'm one of the 3 co-chairs of the WILPF Disarm End Wars Issue Committee. Welcome to this Congress session titled Move the Money from War to Peace, Global to Local. I will be moderating this session. We have 6 knowledgeable speakers to fill our 90 minutes with information on global and US military spending and some strategies for getting these unconscionable amounts of money moved out of fueling wars and into peaceful uses. Let me briefly tell you how this session is organized. I will start us off with a presentation that gives you some hard data on how much money is being spent on nuclear weapons and on war. I will take a few questions after my presentation. Then we will hear from a distinguished Norwegian peace educator, Ingeborg Breines, who will tell us about efforts to strengthen Nordic-Russian civil society relations. Ingeborg will take questions immediately after her talk. Next, we will have 4 talks describing various strategies that are already being used to get the US military budget reduced. I will introduce those speakers at the start of that portion of talks. And there will be another Q&A period after those 4 strategy talks. And then at the very end, another Disarm co-chair, Ellen Thomas, will wrap up our session. We hope we're aiming for 3:15 Pacific time. So there will be 3 different Q&A periods during this session. And you know the process. If you have a question, please put it in the chat box in all caps. And if you have a particular person you want it to answer, say who it's for. And we have a timekeeper, Nancy Price, will be keeping time and helping us look in the chat window for your questions. So this is a brief overview. I'm using data from the International Campaign Against Nuclear Weapons Complicit report that was written by these two ladies who are working for ICANN. And I'm also using data from other sources, as you will see. So now I want to go to the next one. Okay, so we know there are 9 nuclear armed states in the world, and the ICANN people worked out that they are spending in 2020 $72.6 billion on their nuclear weapons. And this shows you how many dollars per minute each of those 9 countries has been spending. And you can see the US is spending $70,000 of your money a minute on our nuclear weapons. And then you can see how the other countries are a lot smaller, but nevertheless, a lot of money being spent. So there is a wide nuclear industry that is scheming for our dollars, okay, to keep up this global arsenal of catastrophically destructive weapons. It takes a lot of effort on some other people's part. So this $72.6 billion, okay, then $27.7 billion of that is sent off to companies, corporate companies, commercial companies who are making the weapons and the missiles that deliver them for these various countries. But how do they keep that going? Well, then they send the money, they send a bunch of money to lobbyists who are talking to our politicians saying, oh yes, we definitely need these weapons. Please keep sending us money. And they're also sending money to think tanks. Okay, I hadn't appreciated this, but there are think tanks that are writing reports and memos to bolster what the lobbyists are saying, which is, yes, we really need all these weapons. And then, of course, the lobbyists are then encouraging our politicians to keep spending our tax money. And they are so feeding into making sure this $72 billion keeps on happening every year. This is just 1 year. Okay, so here is a list of all the companies we know all over the world who are helping various governments to make these nuclear weapons and the missiles that deliver them. You will recognize some of the names. The ones you don't recognize are probably the ones that are out of the US. But at the top, you will see General Dynamics, and you will see that they spent just $13.9 million on lobbying. And what did that gain them? Well, it got them nearly $40 billion in general defense contracts, of which $10.8 billion was for nuclear weapons work. This is just in 1 year. So their lobbying is very successful. Unfortunately for us, we're sitting here trying to counteract this lobbying that's going on. And you'll hear more about how we're dealing with these companies in one of the strategy talks later. So now let's just look at the US military budget. And well, totally what's called the President's proposed discretionary budget that he sent off to Congress back in March. This is the upcoming fiscal year that starts in October. And you'll see here, this big blue section here is the military budget, which you can see is larger than the rest of all these other departments. The Department of Transportation will get this much, Energy and Environment will get this much, Health will get this much. So this is what we're against. We want to reduce this $765 billion and move some of that money into one of these pieces of the pie chart. But first, I'm going to show you how much wars cost. And we, of course, are all terribly upset with what's going on in Afghanistan right now. So another organization called Cost of War has calculated how much money has been spent on the Afghan war since 2001 through to April 2021. And it's $2.261 trillion, okay? And I show you at the top what $1 trillion looks like, and how many zeros you have. So, and they've divided this up in this pie chart here. This thing called overseas contingency operations is then euphemism for fighting war. Okay, so this was the actual fighting the war, but then we have to look after our veterans. We have to pay interest. We've borrowed this money, mostly from China, and we have to pay interest on it. So that's an enormous amount of money. And then they calculate in that things are inflation is increasing. So this is, you know, the cost of the Afghan war that, as you all know, has really got nobody anywhere and is leaving the country in worse shape than when we entered it. So what are the ways we deliver nuclear weapons? Well, there are 3 different ways the US does it. It's called the Nuclear Triad. We can drop them from large planes. We can fire them from missile bunkers that are in the central part of the US. And we can also fire them from submarines that are out there. Nobody knows where. That's the point. The submarines can't be tracked, we hope. But the enemy knows exactly where these silos are sitting in North Dakota and Wyoming and places like that. So this is what we are called the Nuclear Triad. So how much money is being spent on that? Well, every 2 years, the Congressional Budget Office has to make a projection for the next 10 years. How much are we going to spend on what they call nuclear forces, which is all these things and the people that go with them? And they say $634 billion for the next 10 years. That's like $60 billion a year on average. 2/3 of that is incurred by the DOD, and it's the missile, the special submarines and the ICBMs that cost the most. The latter are actually reaching the end of their service life. Things are running out. The electronics isn't as good as it used to be and things like that. And this is an issue, as we will see. And the DOE, of course, is running Lawrence Livermore Lab and Los Alamos Lab in New Mexico, Livermore across the San Francisco Bay from me. And they're the ones who are designing new weapons and making plans for what we call new plutonium pits and things like that, which I'm not going to bore you with. So believe it or not, that amount of money actually is only 7% of what is our projected total defense cost, okay? You know, but it's worth tackling, all right? So the CBO have projected that $188 billion will be needed to modernize these nuclear weapons that are reaching their end of life and their delivery systems. $8 billion would be on new ICBMs that would sit in the silos. They are sitting ducks, okay? The Russians know exactly where they are. And so if the president were to get an alert that there is an attack coming, there's some Russian missiles approaching the center of our country, he has about 15 minutes to decide whether he should fire ours before they get obliterated by the Russians. And ours, of course, are directed towards places like Moscow and St. Petersburg. And that, of course, would be the beginning of an all-out nuclear war and leading to nuclear winter. What the worry is that it could be a faulty warning. It's happened before. Flocks of birds and things like that have misled our radar detection systems. So we really want to get rid of these ICBMs. We actually don't want them at all, let alone replace the aging ones. So there's lots of money we could take out of the military budget and really not hurt very much in the way of defending our country. Really, we need to be defending against pandemics, not about against Russian missiles. So people have worked out, well, if you didn't make these new ICBMs, you could save $16 billion. And Representative Ro Khanna from down the road from me, he introduced a new act, HR 2227, where he says, just leave those old ones there and redirect the savings into a development of a coronavirus vaccine, a new one, or other purposes. And you will hear about what we're trying to do to move this particular act along.
Cheryl,
And
do you want to go to your questions?
yeah, I've got one more slide. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
On Wednesday, just Wednesday, Rep. Pocan from Wisconsin, he introduced another bill, and he specifically says, take $9.6 billion from this enormous military budget and give it to the COVAX initiative, who will send vaccines to the rest of the world. As we know, the pandemic will not stop if we don't help the people in the poorer parts of the world who haven't had much vaccination. Because as long as the pandemic can keep growing over there, it's going to come back, and it has. So this bill was introduced just on Wednesday, so we don't have a number for it yet, but this is one of the bills we must support. And you will learn about how to support these bills and things in our strategies section. So I will now take some questions. Thank you. This is just on my part, please. And Nancy is looking to see if you have any questions.
Well, people would like you to share these slides at some point with everybody.
Right. In general, if you will want to get some slides or the resource guides or the toolkit that we are preparing, you should put your email address in the chat box, please. If you're a WILPF member, you will get all this because it'll come out in e-news and e-alerts. But if you're not a WILPF member and you would like to borrow some of this information, yes, please put your email address in the chat and we will keep that. Anything else, Nancy?
Yes, there's a question from Joan Eckline. Our current president is planning to spend 1.7, I guess that's billion dollars over 3 decades to modernize our nuclear weapons. What is WILPF going to do about that? Excuse me, trillion.
Trillion, that's the 30-year number.
Yes,
I've been quoting you the 10-year numbers. And that is the strategies you're going to hear about shortly, is the various ways. We've got letters you can write to the president, getting to your own politicians and saying you must support this particular bill, which is 2850, which is specifically to abolish all our nuclear weapons and disarm completely. We have to get these bills out of there where they're languishing. They're languishing in committees, in the Foreign Relations Committee, in the Armed Services Committee, in the House. They need more co-sponsors. So we are asking you, and you'll be hearing more about this, to press your own representative that you want them to support these bills and to join. There's actually a caucus of people who want to reduce the defense spending. It's called the Defense Spending Reduction Caucus. Yes.
It's time to introduce Ingeborg.
Okay, thank you very much. I am honored to introduce our next speaker, Ingeborg Breines. There she is. And she is joining us from the far north of Norway. And in a moment, I'm going to put up a slide that shows you the map of Norway, Sweden, Russia, so you understand why she's worried about relations with Russia. And she's going to describe what she's doing to try to make more friendly relations with Russia, because one of the ways to reduce military budget is to not have such big budgets in the first place, because you have fewer enemies. So if we can have fewer enemies, hopefully we'll have a lower budget. Although I know some people would argue with that logic. So let me tell you about Ingeborg. She is a Norwegian peace educator. She is senior advisor to the World Summit of Nobel Peace Laureates. She served as director of the Women and a Culture of Peace program of UNESCO. And from 2009 to 2016, she was president of the International Peace Bureau. Ms. Breines has served and continues to serve on a broad range of boards and committees. She has authored, co-authored, and edited publications, notably on gender issues, education, conflict resolution, and a culture of peace. And you can see it's dark where she is because she's far north of the Arctic Circle. So thank you, Ingeborg. Please give us your wisdom.
Thank you for the introduction. Happy to be with you. And the North Norwegian white nights have just stopped. So we now also have darkness in the evening. So thank you for the invitation to briefly present to you the ongoing efforts that we have to strengthen Nordic-Russian civil society relations, and also to reflect on whether the time now is ripe to try friendship with Russia instead of animosity. And your introduction, Cheryl, you said, I'm worried because of our neighborhood to Russia. I'm actually more worried about the relationship to your country these days. So Norway, as you may know, has a common border with Russia in the far north. And we also have negotiated a dividing line in the Barents Sea or the North Sea, regulating the rich fisheries as well as oil, gas, and mineral drilling. This is important because lately the interest in the Arctic is strongly growing because climate change opens for more exploitation of natural resources and for transport and traffic in the now partly ice-free Northeast Passage. Norway has never had any armed conflict with Russia. The people in the north, not least the indigenous Sami people, the Finnish, Norwegian, Russian, and Swedish, have over the centuries relied for their survival on exchange of goods, on trade, and on good relations and good neighborhood. All the countries of the Arctic, including the United States and Canada, are members of the Arctic Council, an exceptionally important body for cooperation and understanding, which it is vital to keep non-militarized and non-politicized. These new possibilities in the Arctic, however, also attract strong commercial interests and add to the already high tension between the West, notably the United States, and Russia. This tension is a major driver behind the present militarization and arms race, involving both conventional and nuclear weapons. Enormous resources are used on both sides on surveillance, not least of the nuclear submarines hiding in the deep Norwegian fjords and under the polar ice. NATO and US military exercises in Norway are getting bigger and undertaken ever closer to the Russian border. Imagine for a second if it was the other way around, that the Russians were training just on the border with the US in Mexico. American weapons and ammunition depots, surveillance radars and bases with soldiers, fighter jets, F-35s and B-1 are being established in Norway, close to one of Russia's most important military installations on the Kola Peninsula. It undermines the trust so vital for real cooperation and for our survival, and puts Norway at risk, since none of the big powers, of course, would like a potential war to take place on their soil. This madness has to stop. Both missiles and submarines are, to me, symbols of a totally outdated and testosterone-filled masculinity based on muscular strength and might, which for far too long has been allowed to rule international relations. It is important to look at the role of NATO in this context. NATO, as you know, was established in 1949 as a North Atlantic defense organization to stand up against what was perceived a communist threat from the Soviet Union. As a counter move, the Soviet Union established with other Eastern European countries the Warsaw Pact in 1955, 6 years later. When the Soviet Union was dismantled, the Warsaw Pact closed down and the Cold War was over. There was no rationale anymore for the existence of NATO. But instead of closing down NATO, it has enlarged its domain way beyond the North Atlantic, has become by far the world's largest military power, and has undertaken a series of most unfortunate out-of-area wars, such as in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, etc. NATO had promised the Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev not to move an inch eastward, but quickly broke its promise, and now most of the former Eastern European states are members of NATO. The US is in fact encircling Russia with military bases, which is seen as a provocation and spurs counter actions. We are witnessing what looks like a new arms race and a race for military power also in space, even though Russia expresses the intention not to get into the same situation as during the last Cold War, when they spent so much on their military that it impoverished the people. The West, unfortunately, also failed to answer positively when President Gorbachev undertook a major change in their political system through glasnost and perestroika. There was a call for common security, further reinforced by the Palme Commission, with the hope of mutual survival and not mutual destruction. A dream of peace from Vancouver to Vladivostok. Russia today is presented as a threat, both in the media and in mainstream political rhetoric. Enemy images are created and leaders are being demonized. It creates suspicion and fear, a situation that is undesirable. Several questions arise. Why are these enemy images created and by whom? Who benefits from such a situation? And simultaneously, enemy images of the West are created in Russia, although perhaps not so dominantly as the wish for normal relations seem to be stronger on the Russian side. The US and NATO are far stronger than Russia, both economically and militarily. The US military expenditure is, for instance, more than 10 times that of Russia, closer to 11 times. And there are no more any major ideological differences. So why would the West have to behave so negatively towards Russia? The only plausible answer I can see is the exceptionally strong role of the military industry and the so-called security machinery. We have to protect ourselves. Without a dangerous enemy, people simply would not accept to spend such enormous sums on the military and military build-ups. If there are no enemies, there will be no military confrontations and no need for military industry. Dangerous. In May 2018, some 30 people from different Nordic countries undertook a cultural and peace journey to Russia under the heading Neighbors as friends, not enemies. Our intention was to learn more about Russia, to network with the peace movement, and in a modest way, contribute both to mutual understanding and, if possible, also reduce tension. We wanted to show that not everybody in the West is suffering from Russophobia. We met with academics, peace activists, artists, journalists, mainly in Moscow and St. Petersburg. It had taken time to reconnect, but once there, we enjoyed the culture, the historic monuments, the beauty of the country. And already at our first meeting in the Veteran House in Moscow, we started also enjoying the dialogue. We were told how pleased they were that we came with open and friendly faces, as they said. They expressed sadness because of the isolation from friends and potential friends in the West. They had even feared that the Nordic peace movement was dead, somewhat similar to what we had feared about the Russian peace movement. They had invited lots of people to meet us. They offered song and music, food and food for thought, and we were overwhelmed by the warm reception. The Russians reminded us that the Soviet Union lost 27 million people during World War II, and almost every family in Russia has lost a loved one. This is still so fresh in their minds that they insist that they would not want any new war. It was also clear that the Russians rightly take pride in the liberation of North Norway from the Nazis during World War II, and also feel that they have not gotten sufficient thanks for their huge contribution to the overthrowing of Hitler. Our experience increased the wish to strengthen contacts between the Nordic countries and Russia. Upon return, a statement was developed, sent both to the media and to parliamentarians in the Nordic countries, saying, stop creating images of people as enemies using the rhetoric of the Cold War. This belongs to the past. Support Nordic Russian people-to-people communication politically, practically, and economically. Promote real and positive knowledge about Russia through visits, dialogues, and exchange through the media and in political discussions. Re-evaluate the sanctions against Russia. Invite President Putin and Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Lavrov, for conversation among neighbors in all the Nordic countries. Sign and ratify the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Reduce the defense budget in the Nordic countries like Russia had done, according to the report from Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI. As a follow-up to our trip, and in order to consolidate our efforts, WILPF Norway and the Norwegian Peace Association organized a Nordic Russian civil society seminar at the Peace Research Institute in Oslo in February 2020. And now we are in the final stage of planning a new seminar in November. At the Oslo seminar, participants had open discussions on how to promote peace, disarmament, and a sound environment, and agreed to seek ways to continue practical and strategic forward-looking initiatives and solution-oriented dialogues. Different alternatives were discussed as to how we can contribute to changing attitudes on both sides in order to reverse the nuclear and space arms race, reduce defense spending, and get us out of the dominant growth-oriented, militarized, confrontational, and competitive patterns, and build common security, human security, and a culture of peace and non-violence. Concrete suggestions for cooperation were agreed, like continuing the sharing of knowledge and ideas, get inspiration from each other's culture and art, work for the strengthening of civil society and democratic practices, seek ways of producing and consuming which ensures the well-being of all, and the integrity of the biosphere, establish permanent structures for peace, such as ministries and departments for peace to promote peace at all levels, cherish and use the UN, diplomacy, and multilateral cooperation, strive for a non-militarized and nuclear-free Arctic and Baltic Sea basin, continue to warn against nuclear and other hazardous waste and make waste management safer, see closer cooperation between the peace movement and environmental organizations. The broad majority of major world leaders, however, continue to act as if military might is the answer to the challenges of the day, totally immersed as they are in the old Roman motto, if you want peace, you have to prepare for war. Si vis pacem para bellum. We need to prove that this thinking is dangerous, naive and obsolete. If we want peace, we have to prepare for peace. And we need to address the root causes of conflicts, not only the symptoms. It seems obvious that we cannot continue to misuse the world's resources, both financial and intellectual, for military purposes. According to CIPRI, the world spends more than $1.9 trillion a year on the military, which correspond to more than 600 regular UN budget. With this imbalance, how can the UN be able to do its work properly? Additionally, the excessive military spending cannot provide the security that we want. The military actually makes us less safe, both economically and ecologically, by taking so much of the resources that are needed for other purposes, and by the enormous greenhouse gas emissions, the radiation and pollution it provides. It is high time to understand that we cannot allow the military to be an exception to international climate agreements and continue to make very heavy boot prints on the soil, the water, the air, and even the atmosphere. We risk destroying our beautiful planet, the home to all life as we know it. Existing military forces should instead be converted and retrained to fight the global climate and environmental crisis, the health crisis, which warrants urgent remedial actions and holistic approaches, which again require changing attitudes and rethinking also the unsustainable and destructive production and consumption patterns. We all have work to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ingeborg, for an excellent expose of the many issues that are underlying the enormous military budgets that are weighing down so many countries when the money should be better spent, as this whole session is about. So we have, looking at the time, we have really only time for one question at the moment, although Ingeborg is going to stay with us and we can ask her more questions at the end. One question we have, Ingeborg, would you allow us to publish your statement in our Peace and Freedom magazine sometime?
With great pleasure, of course.
Okay, I will talk to you about that, and that would be a fine way of making your words more widely known. Nancy, was there any really pressing question that you can see in the chat?
Well, there are a couple of questions about the Bilderberg and the Davos conferences where military policies and armaments and weaponry are discussed, and what is the impact of those conferences?
Well, I think then we have to look at militarism and consumerism and capitalism at the same time, because the two conferences mainly discuss how they can earn more money. And we know that the military industrial complex is contributing strongly to that. Although I think that the main military strategic discussions are not neither in Davos nor in the Bilderberg, but within, for us, the NATO cooperation.
Yes, I would agree. All right, so Cheryl, you might go on to your next section.
I think we shall. So Ingeborg, thank you very much, and I'm glad you'll be able to hang out and help us answer later questions. Thank you. So now we're into the strategy section of our session here. There will be 4 speakers. I'm going to introduce 3 of them right now, and then they will be telling you about the campaigns and strategies they've ongoing to deal with some of this military spending. So first I'm going to introduce Asha Osakan. She is the director of Nuclear Ban US, which is an organization committed to the total elimination of nuclear weapons. Asha is an international peace and security specialist with over 14 years of experience. She previously served the United Nations in South Sudan and New York. Before the UN, she worked with Nonviolent Peace Force, implementing civilian protection and peace-building projects in South Sudan and in the US. She co-chairs a working group on conflict prevention, peacekeeping, and peacemaking with women of color advancing peace and security. She's on the board of directors of the Rotary E-Club of World Peace and is actively involved in nuclear weapons education within Rotary. Another of our 3 speakers is Christian Ciabono, and I realize, Christian, I have no idea how to pronounce your second name. He is the Policy and Advocacy Coordinator for Nuclear Age Peace Foundation. He's also a coordinator of Reverse the Trend, Save Our People, Save Our Planet. He has been an activist in the field of nuclear disarmament since 2010. As such, he has organized events for youth and diplomats in Geneva, Vienna, and New York. In December 2018, he served as the co-chair of the Global Youth Forum on the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And during various UN disarmament conferences, he served as an advisor for the mission of the Marshall Islands to the UN. Our 3rd speaker is Vicki Elson. She is a mother and a grandmother, and she's a co-founder of Treaty Alignment US and Nuclear Ban US. She holds a master's degree in anthropology and has had a long career in childbirth education. She's currently at Quaker House in Brussels, Belgium, where the Quaker Council for European Affairs is dedicated to peace and human rights. And I will be the 4th speaker on strategy. So Asha and Christian, which of you wants to go first?
Asha, please.
Asha, please go ahead, Asha.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Let me share the screen. Can you all see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. Cheryl has already mentioned about how much money is being spent on nuclear weapon. And as of now, 13,500 nuclear weapons are in those world with 9 nuclear weapon countries. And out of this one, 90% is with the US and Russia. Now, in response to the nuclear weapon threat that's posed to the human survival, the environment, the socio-economic development, the global economy, food security, and the health and welfare of current and future generation, the international community or the international civil society organizations came together in responding to this threat, and as a result, the ban treaty was born. The negotiation started in 2017, and in 2021, January 22nd, the treaty came into force by with the ratification of by 50 countries. Oh, not able to move. Okay. Why this treaty is important? Because this treaty is a first treaty which is responding, or which clearly in response to the humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapon threat, and it also provides provision for victims assistance, which the assistance to the victims that's as a result of the nuclear weapon testing and protection. So Article 1 of the the ban treaty talks about the making it illegal. The treaty makes the nuclear weapon illegal. So if you look into this slide, the ban treaty prevents development of nuclear weapon, testing of nuclear weapon, produce of nuclear weapon, acquiring nuclear weapon, stockpiling nuclear weapons, transfer nuclear weapon, use or threaten to use nuclear weapon, host nuclear weapon, or assist with or encourage with these activities. Nuclear ban.us, as Cheryl said, is committed for the total elimination of nuclear weapons, and we work at all levels, like federal level, state level, municipal level, organization, and individual level, for building political and public support for the TPNW, which is a treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. There are many strategies. Nuclear ban.us has been using many strategies to build this political and public support. There are two commitments. One is the international commitment. Now, the international commitment, you can ask your representative to sign the ICAN pledge. ICAN pledge is the international commitment, international campaign to abolish nuclear weapon, and it's a coalition of civil society organizations. And you can ask your representative to sign the ICAN pledge, which is an international commitment, which is whereby the representative is committing to along with the other international community, that they will commit to eliminate the nuclear weapon. You can go to our website, www.nuclearban.us. There's a national map which explains how to write a letter to your representative. So the name and email ID of the representative is in this national map, where you can write a letter to your representative. At the moment, there are 11 members of the Congress have signed the ICAN pledge. And there are many state legislatures have also signed the ICAN pledge. Most recently, in the last 2 weeks, I believe more than 5 state senators have signed the ICAN pledge, committing themselves to eliminate this nuclear weapon. These are the 11 members of the Congress who have already signed the ICAN pledge. I'm not going to say the names and all, because it's already in the slide. Now, coming to the domestic commitment, at the federal level, Representative Eleanor Holmes Norton have introduced a bill which is called the Norton's Bill, HR 2850, which is asking the US to sign and ratify the TPNW, and calls the US to take leadership in eliminating the nuclear weapon. Christian will be talking more about this particular bill, and I'm not going to go into the details of this bill. Similarly, like the federal, at the state level, there are several initiatives at the state level to get commitment for this TPNW. And one of the example is S1555 and S1556, which is called the Nuclear Weapon Commission Bill, and the back from the Brink resolution was introduced in the Massachusetts state legislatures. And we recently had, the Public Safety Committee recently held a hearing, and many of us made testimony during the hearing, and many others submitted written testimony to the committee, asking them to support the TPNW and asking them to move this particular bills from out of the committee for the next legislative process. And at the city and the town level, there are several resolutions being passed by city and town, committing to the TPNW and also disconnecting from the nuclear weapon industry. Vicki Elson, who is a co-founder of nuclearban.us, will be talking more about, like how to move money and pressurize the profiteers, and also the ordinances and the resolutions. We meet Nuclear Ban US Action Group, which consists of like WILPF, Nuclear Age Peace Foundation, ICANN, and many other organizations meet every Thursday, 6 to 7 p.m. To build this movement, and also to strategize on how to build political and public support for the TPNW and for the total elimination of nuclear weapons. Now, Christian will talk more about the HR 2850 and the strategies to build support for the HR 2850.
Okay, so hi everyone. So I am Christian Chabanu. I'm the Policy and Advocacy Coordinator of the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation. And I will be talking about campaigning on both HR 2850, the Nuclear Weapons Abolition Economic and Conversion Act of 2021, and investing in an HR 2227, Investing in Cures Before Missiles Act of 2021. So next, so HR 2850, Nuclear Weapons Abolition Economic and Energy Conversion Act, was sponsored by Representative Eleanor Holmes Norton, which you'll see before you. It's a great picture of her, and she introduced the act in April of 2021. So what the act states, I can go through it all. Basically, and this is really momentous. She's been introducing similar bills since 1994, but this version of the bill, of the act, states that the United States government shall provide leadership by signing and ratifying the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, as well as any other international agreement that provides for the dismantlement and elimination of all nuclear weapons in every country, and strict and effective international control for such dismantlement and elimination. It also has other clauses in it, as well as redirecting resources that are being used for nuclear weapons program, and also calling for the US to actively promote policies to reduce all other countries to join in such commitments. Really, momentous. And it was really, it's been really great to campaign about this bill. The co-sponsors are before you in that list. So we have Representative James McGovern, Representative Barbara Lee, Renan Omar, Mark Kukan, Carolyn Maloney from my district, which I'm really honored that she has co-sponsored the bill, and Representative Rashid Tlaib. So basically, I want to also address HR 2227, Investing in Cures for Missile Acts. Cheryl kindly already talked about it in her presentation, so I won't spend too much time on it. But essentially, it was sponsored by Representative Ro Khanna, California, and it's to halt the modernization of the ICBMs that make up the land leg of the nuclear triad that Cheryl mentioned. And before you can see the list of all the co-sponsors. So this essentially, on the side, it's highlighting the phone banking campaign, the strategy that Nuclear Age Peace Foundation teamed up with WILPF US, as well as Nuclear Ban US, which is really exciting. So I would say back in May, or a few months before, WILPF US Disarm and End Wars Committee identified two significant pieces of legislation that has been stuck in the committees of the current Congress. And these two are the two bills that I talked about before, Eleanor Holmes Norton's bill and Ro Khanna's bill as well. So they asked for volunteers to engage in sustained lobbying campaign, to engage in phone calls. And this was really inspired by a webinar that WILPF Disarm Committee attended back in May that was facilitated by Peace Action on HR 227. And legislative staffers for the bill's sponsors who were guests at the webinar recommended a targeted, intensive phone calling campaign to bring constant attention to the legislation, hopefully resulting in more co-sponsors and quick action from the committees, from from the committee where that legislation now sits. So this really inspired the groups, to do outreach to, especially to the youth, to have them like reach out to congressional members who are affiliated with two different caucuses, the Defense Spending Reduction and the Progressive Caucus. So they, the NAF interns, NAPF interns engage in phone banking. They contacted congressional offices and were really, talk to staffers and obtain social media information, Twitter and Facebook accounts of all, relevant congressional members. I think it's really, crucial to have to provide tools for young people and for everyone to really, engage in a social media campaign in which they can compose, quick tweets, concise tweets about the act and the bill, about the two legislation, two pieces for Congress, and then to really, interact with congressional aides and staffers and members of Congress via social media. And I'm just going to minimize and show the phone campaign contact list. And I'm not sure if everyone can see this. Is this also before you? Can we all see it? Yeah, so you can see Cheryl kindly provided, and WILPF provided all the list of the relevant congressional members. Also information on whether, if they're from the Progressive Caucus or the Defense Spending Reduction Caucus, if, whether they're co-sponsoring HR 227 or 2850, if they have co-sponsored the past bill by Eleanor Holmes Norton. As I mentioned before, she's been, really presenting similar bills, reiterations of the bills in the past. So she's been really on this case since the 90s. The ICANN pledge, whether the representative Congress has signed it, the relevant website, the DC phone number, local phone number, additional committees that they are on, and then the interns, and then the staffers. So the interns, what they did was we divided up the list, and the NAPF interns went through the list and they provided notes. So the date, who they spoke to, left the message. And then they were also able, and this is really key, going back to the social media, they were able to obtain the relevant Twitter and Facebook accounts for each relevant member of Congress.
Christian, can you move along soon so we can also hear from Vicki?
Yes, of course. So that's the conclusion of my presentation. If there's time, we wanted to show Eleanor Holmes Norton's video by her. So if it's okay, I'm going to try to play it.
Go ahead, Christian. You can have some of my time for that. It's great.
Please. Okay, thank you.
Is to speak with you about the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons and why it is critical that the United States use its leadership to eliminate nuclear weapons by ratifying this important international treaty. I have introduced the Nuclear Weapons Abolition and Economic and Energy Conversion Act of 2021, which would require the United States to sign and ratify an international agreement to disable and dismantle America's nuclear weapons, strictly control fissile material and radioactive waste, and use nuclear-free energy. I want to especially thank the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons, or ICANN, as well as Nuclear Ban US. I would also like to recognize the work of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, Nuclear Age Peace Foundation, and the US Nuclear Ban Action Group. As the only nation that has used nuclear weapons in war, and as a nation that possesses one of the largest arsenals of nuclear weapons, I am seeking support for my bill, support of the treaty and support of the I Can pledge to help the United States reestablish its moral leadership in the world. Again, I want to thank all of you who have been working on this very important issue to make ours a much safer world.
Yes, thank you so much. And that concludes my presentation.
Okay.
Okay, so Vicki, go ahead, please.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can y'all see that?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll just be brief here. I just want to direct your attention to a little toolkit. So this is the Treaty Alignment Campaign. We are affiliated with nuclearban.us, which does political work, most importantly on the ICANN Pledge and the Norton Bill, as you have heard from Asha and Christian, yay. And the Treaty Alignment Campaign does a couple of things. It has educational materials, which we're still building. We haven't developed that as much as we plan to yet. But I wanted to particularly direct your attention to this section, the Pressuring the Nuclear Weapons Profiteers. So we have a webinar that we presented in June, and it's really worth watching, I think. It has Susie Snyder from Don't Bank on the Bomb and Nick Cantrell from Green Future Wealth, who's a really a leader in the socially responsible investing field. And it's very nuts and bolts, like here's what you do. So if you want to see that webinar, there's a link to it there. And then we have some media tools, a fact sheet about the treaty, a sample press release, a sample op-ed, a sample letter to the editor. We encourage people to just get the word out. It's really, really useful thing. Now, here's a fun thing. Writing a letter to the CEO or corporate leader of one of the companies that makes nuclear weapons. Here, I can show you, we have a sample letter, and we also have their contact information. And I want to eventually merge all the information we have, so it'll be just click and send. We haven't gotten that far yet, but I mean, you can put it together yourself if you want to. If you want to find out how much these CEOs earn, you can find that in the complicit report from ICANN. Just a little tidbit, to give you some idea how much they're profiting off of keeping the entire world in very grave danger. So a very fun thing to do is go to the corporations themselves or go to the military sites. We like to go and put up a sign that says, this corporation is engaged in activities prohibited by the Nuclear Ban Treaty. And we also, so that's the sign. You can see here, this is a yellow sheet that kind of explains everything. Here's a copy of the treaty itself. And we wear these fun white uniforms that you don't have to wear if you don't want to, but it is fun. So this shows what we do. This is a little hats off to the late, great Sister Ardith and her partner in crime, Sister Carol. They have been going for years to weapons facilities, not just corporations, but the facilities themselves, and notifying them that they are in violation of the treaty. And but actually, before the treaty was done, they would say, hey, what you're doing is immoral. And then once what they're doing is actually illegal, they return to their so-called crime scene where they got arrested for notifying these facilities that they were doing something terrible. And they came back with the Nobel Peace Prize and the treaty. So these are we like to wear, white painter's suits, basically, because they look official, and we put a sign on our backs that says Treaty Compliance Unit. And we visit, this is at the nuclear base in Faslane, Scotland. This is sharing the treaty with the head of the base. This is reading the treaty to the guards at the base. This is putting up a sign on the base grounds, notifying them what they're doing is prohibited by this international treaty. And you can see God in that picture, right here shining down on us, which is very nice. So if you do this kind of thing, you may get arrested. Please don't do that without planning ahead a great deal. And we have an example there of a resource that you could use. So we have the signs and banners available here for you to print out. We have a letter to deliver to the people in charge of the corporation. That's that yellow letter that you see here. We have copies of the treaty. And then divestment is a whole other thing. Everything you want to know about divestment that we want to say is in our webinar. So I really suggest that you watch it. It's about socially responsible investing. Is it hard to divest? Not particularly. Does it make a difference? Well, these are companies with huge budgets, but they do care about their reputation. And it really can have an impact. And if you invest in nuclear weapons, it is very, very unlikely to harm your portfolio. In fact, I have divested and it's done my portfolio a great deal of good. These are not great investments in my experience. So we also talked about how to get your pension fund to divest and get your bank to divest. And another fun thing to do is go to shareholder meetings. This year, they were all virtual, or almost all virtual. I refuse to go to anything that isn't virtual in the middle of the pandemic this year. These were several months ago. But I did go to a number of them virtually, and it was hard to get up and speak. I have spoken at them before in person, and it's a lot of fun to talk right to the CEO and the shareholders. So it was harder online, but it can still be done. So there's something there for you. So I just wanted to draw your attention to the treaty alignment campaign, to the Pressuring the Profiteers page, and all kinds of tools that you can use if you want to get inspired to communicate directly with the companies that make nuclear weapons. Our theory of change is that when they realize that they need to get out of this business, because they're at risk, even their executives might be at risk if they're doing business in companies that have ratified the treaty and passed laws against what they're doing. So their executives can actually get in a great deal of trouble in those countries, depending on what laws they end up passing. So I lost my train of thought. Anyway, this is action that you can take if you get inspired. Thanks very much, and thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. So there are several cities in the country who have been passing resolutions, right? This is bringing the idea down to your branch level. If you're a WILPF branch, we hope you will consider trying to make a resolution for your city council about the military budget. And oh dear. Okay, so the argument is the pandemic has really hurt cities. Their budgets are hurting. They don't have enough money to help their citizens, and they don't have much taxing capacity. And so they want more of the federal budget to help the citizens in their cities. And you make a campaign around this thought that there's a resolution that your city council will consider, and what you're asking them to do is to put pressure on your federal representatives. Okay, everything really comes down to pressuring our people in Congress not to allow this money to be appropriated and spent on weapons. And you need a well-organized campaign with lots of allies. So you would join, you would find similar organizations in your geographic region who would join with you. And therefore you can, yes, nearly done.
There's some problem with your screen sharing. A message keeps popping up to move some window away.
Right.
If you're able to do that.
Yeah,
if
no.
you're not.
just I'm having to go fast anyway. So you you recruit steering committee members to help you, then you recruit endorsing organizations. And in the toolkit that we'll be providing, there will be samples of all these lists. And then you have to identify your collaborators and set up the campaign structure. And that seems to have disappeared. So you have a steering committee, then you have other subcommittees. Some people will work on the resolution wording, some people will work on the council. And okay. And then you have a public hearing, you have a committee for that, and then you have an outreach. You've got to reach your council. You've got to find the council member who will actually do this resolution for you. So I'm going to skip over this. You have month by month, you're going to have things happening. If you've got a well-organized campaign, Pittsburgh ended up with a resolution. Resolutions always have a lot of whereases. Many, many whereases, and then you finally get to the resolution. You resolve that the city council should write a letter to your federal representative and say you really must reduce the budget. You must join this defense spending reduction caucus we've told you about. And now, unfortunately, the resolution was never heard in Pittsburgh. They refused to bring it onto the agenda, but Allegheny County, which is where the county around Pittsburgh, actually did pass Move the Money campaign. And they have been talking to the congressional representatives from Pennsylvania. The city of New Haven has also been very successful. They actually demand a annual report from their congressperson and their 2 senators. What have you done lately to reduce the military budget? And my understanding is that these cities at the bottom there, New York, Chicago, Boston, LA, are all working on these Move the Money resolutions. So the toolkit that we are going to be making will contain sample letters, sample campaign, brochures, all kinds of things. So your branch can just pick this stuff up, fill in a few words, and fly to your city council meetings. This is the website of the national organization. They also have some, some resources there. So if you want to be told when we actually post the toolkit, and then you put your name and address in chat right now. If you're a WILPF member, you will get to hear anyway, because we will be putting this in e-alerts and e-news. So please, everybody, I'm always telling you this in one WILPF call, please open up the e-news and read what people have taken the trouble to write about and learn all the marvelous things that WILPF does. You know, this Disarm End Wars is just one of the many issue committees. So now we have a few minutes for questions to be asked to any of the speakers we've had. Okay, I think Ingeborg is still here in the north of Norway. Vicki is still here in Belgium. It is approaching midnight there. Thank you very much for staying on with us. So Nancy, would you please help us find any questions that have come up?
There was a question for Vicki about what success have you seen with divestment?
Unmute yourself.
Okay, sorry. Not a lot so far. However, our colleagues at don'tbankonthebomb.com have had tremendous success, and you can go to don'tbankonthebomb.com and see a list. I mean, a couple of the biggest pension funds in the world have divested, and Deutsche Bank, and you know, there's a lot of momentum. So we're talking about divesting. They work on divesting from banks and financial institutions and the companies, and we kind of have the opposite emphasis, but the same thing. You know, we work on the companies. So I wish I could tell you that we in the U.S. have had a lot of success with this so far. It's a work in progress. But I did get my train of thought back. And the theory of change is that when the companies realize that they really need to get out of this business for all kinds of economic reasons and even personal liability reasons for their executives, they will then go back to the politicians whose campaigns they fund and who send them lots and lots of taxpayer money, they'll go back to those politicians and say, hey, can you help us convert to green technologies and other pressing human needs, which in fact did happen to several companies at the end of the Cold War. And we should have kept going. It was a great strategy, and we still can.
Okay, Nancy.
Lots of requests for the toolkit. Let's see. Great appreciation for the presentations. Let's see.
We did that.
I just
we did that one already, Ellen. We answered that one earlier.
Which one? The Bilderberg and Davos?
Yes, we did.
Answered that one. I see somebody asking about the major media. There is an organization called Rethink Media that works with nonprofits to get op-eds and letters to the editor actually posted in major media. So last year, during the 75th anniversary of the dropping of the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, there were hundreds of organizations that worked with Rethink Media, and Rethink Media did get quite a lot of articles in the major media about the need to get rid of these weapons. And the very fact that, we know we're having some influence because, as I told you, just 3 days ago, Representative Pocan in Wisconsin introduced a brand new bill with the, take $9.6 billion out of the military budget and give it to COVAX to disperse vaccine, anti-COVID vaccine all over the world. And when I read the language in these bills, it's obvious that they've been talking to organizations like us. You can see the same language being used. They are listening to us and understanding the process, understanding why we need to reduce the budget and move it into human benefits to humans, and Vicki was mentioning that I think it's in Holland, there are enormous pension plans for public employees, and they have divested from any company that makes nuclear weapons. And at Stanford University, we were hoping to get a divestment strategy. They did listen to the fossil fuels that the students did. So Stanford is divesting from fossil fuels. Now, they would argue that's because they can see that fossil fuel companies aren't going to make so much money in the future because we're not going to be allowed to burn the coal. So yes, there are many opportunities to get, and if you've got a public, like the school teachers union and things like that, what we need is people within those unions with pension plans to work on getting their investment advisor, who advises them where to put the money, say, no, we don't want you to put it in Lockheed Martin, and so on. Any other questions?
Ingeborg made a comment. Big Norwegian pension fund, oil fund, has also divested from nuclear. Thank you, Ingeborg.
Right. So it's an idea, that is being taken up, and so that's good. So any more questions? Because
I don't see any right at the moment. People would like to know when this video will be available.
Well, all the videos from the Congress are going to be posted after Congress has finished, and when Ellen Thomas, who is doing great duty as our tech person, when she's had time to edit them and make them nice, they will go on the WILPF US YouTube channel. And if you're a WILPF member, you'll get an e-news or an e-alert that tells you they're there. Okay, so please read those things that we send you, and if you're here, you're not a member, if you've put your email address in the chat, we will assume that you also would like to know when all the Congress video recordings are made. So Jane Doyle to everyone. Jane, Cricket just posted a question. I saw it flash up. And then
Can you speak, Vicki, can you speak more about getting companies to ask for money to help with converting to green technologies? Any leads how to work on that approach?
Well, I think what I'm going to be doing is rewriting and tidying up the system for writing to politicians. So there'll be an easier way to do that. But I would just say you need to get out of the nuclear weapons business, and they'll probably do that by themselves. They know which side their bread is buttered on and where their money comes from. And I think that they will figure that out themselves. You can suggest it if you want to. We live in a corrupt system where big money buys politicians and they funnel money back into the company. I mean, we saw when Cheryl showed how a little bit of lobbying goes a long way. And a little bit of campaign donating, goes a long way. So, that'll be the next project is cleaning that up.
I can tell you that somebody did an analysis of how many jobs are produced if you invest X amount of dollars into the nuclear weapons industry, and how many jobs are created if you invest the same number of dollars into green technology. And there's a lot more jobs that are actually produced if you're investing in green technology and peaceful types of production of industries. So I see we've come to 3:10 p.m. And so our last 5 minutes, Nancy has a remark there to everybody. Make sure they really are green. So Ellen is going to be our last speaker. She's also a Disarm co-chair, and I'm hoping that she's had time to listen to what was said, and she's going to kind of try to give you a really quick overview of what we've told you today.
I don't think I can, frankly. No,
Shall I do it?
Yes.
Okay, so we started off by showing you just how many billions of dollars are spent on nuclear weapons, trillions of dollars spent on military spending in general. So that was the background, and that it outweighs what's being spent on civilian human needs. And so then Ingeborg told us what's been going on in her part of Norway, where to me it's a strategy is if you could be more friendly with a country, then you're less likely to go to war with them. And so this is like what we call citizen diplomacy. And so they are trying to be more friendly with the Russians and visit them. And then they make statements. And Ingeborg, we will probably try to publish your very good speech in our Future of Peace and Freedom magazine. And then 4 of us described various strategies that are already ongoing to move money out of the military budget. You can do it in a variety of ways. Most of it comes down to talking to Congress and having bills passed by Congress, because that is where the money, your taxpayers' money, actually is sent. Somebody. Okay, anyway, so we will provide you a toolkit that WILPF branches or individual members of WILPF can take up and help you to make some more some strategy, campaigns of your own. But a good idea is always to coordinate and collaborate with similar organizations in your geographic region. We know that Physicians for Social Responsibility have very many chapters. Veterans for Peace are all over the place, and you can find joint campaigns. This Move the Money campaign that I spent a few minutes telling you about is an excellent vehicle. One could argue it's just a vehicle to make a coalition, right? Because we need to be stronger. We have to offset these awful lobbyists and who are, influencing our politicians and making them believe that we need these weapons. And just to say, you can get rid of weapons. If you look back at in the late 1980s, when USSR turned into Russia, there were actually 90,000 weapons back then, nuclear weapons, 90,000. Now we're down to about 15,000. That's because they went and they took them apart. And the Russians took some apart and we took some apart. And they sent inspectors to check it was really being done. So the International Energy Authority, IEAA, is set up to do this kind of thing, to check that people really are disarming when they say they are, to check that there are no nuclear testing going on illegally. So there's a lot of setup out there to make this disarmament happen, and we just need to take advantage of it. There are people working on making the connections between climate and the military. We know that the US military uses more fuel than anybody else, and that fuel a lot of it's diesel, comes with a lot of emissions. And so they are contributing to climate change more than most people. So trying to collaborate with your climate change activists in your area is a good idea. They will find common cause. And we did a solidarity season last year. There are resource guides that we wrote that told you all about these connections between the military and the climate change. We also have resources on the racism that's rife in our military. And so the thing to remember is we're not alone. WILPF is not alone. We might sometimes feel we're alone, but we're not. There are a lot of other people out there working on getting rid of nuclear weapons, getting rid of the military, as I say, unconscionably large military budget. I see we're now at 316.
May I say something, Cheryl? I want to suggest that people join the Nuclear Weapons Abolition Working Group that Asha, Asakan, and Christian are heading up. And it's every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern time, 3 p.m. Pacific time. We might be thinking about changing to another day of the week because it's difficult for some of us to get there on Thursdays, but it's a really important opportunity to network with other organizations that are working on these issues and to see how these two young people are doing a fabulous job. We need to plug in with them and learn from them and pick up on the ideas that they are presenting to us.
And
this is Nancy. I'd like to invite Ingeborg to make a comment. She signaled that she would like to do so.
we are over time, so please make it very
Thank
brief.
you. I'll be very quick. I wanted to underline the importance of building fear and enemy images, because if we continue to do that, to point at the others the whole time, this will never end. We can start reducing armament here or there, but unless we stop thinking that the others are stupid or dangerous or whatever, it will never end. So to me, that is important. Secondly, I think it is important to see nuclear disarmament and disarming conventional weapons at the same time, because the argument is that if we don't have nuclear arms, there will be so much rearming of conventional arms.
Yeah.
And finally, the last thing, when it comes to counting nuclear weapons, it is almost naive, because the weapons are so much more effective, stronger, 100 times plus than what we had before. They are smaller, which means it's easier to use. they go quicker, the satellites, etc., go much quicker. So it is, even though there is a reduction in the number, the danger is much, much bigger. Thank you. Thank you for a nice session.
Thank you, Ingeborg. So I'd like to thank everybody, our speakers and the people who've stayed with us, and we will save the chat and be in touch when the toolkits are ready. So please, everybody go and save the chat, and I will hand it back to Darian. Thank you.
Thank you. So